And amazing ask, a millionaire discovers transformative hope and a stranger's hidden story of resilience. Henry Thompson had built his empire with the precision of a watchmaker, each cog meticulously placed. But in the solitude of his penthouse overlooking the bustling Midwestern town, wealth felt like a gilded cage. The clinking of his success echoed hollowly in his ears. What was he really achieving? Nights dripped into insomnia as something deep within him begged for connection. He needed to reclaim a sense of purpose, so he volunteered at a local food bank, drawn to the prospect of redeeming himself through service. As he entered the food bank, the air buzzed with the sounds of plates and chatter, yet it all felt like a masquerade, everyone wearing smiles to disguise hidden struggles. That's when he saw her, Sarah, a librarian with eyes that reflected a quiet storm of resilience. As they exchanged casual greetings, Henry felt an unexpected pull, like gravity drawing two disparate lives together. The weight in their gazes held layers of untold stories. As he watched her hand tremble slightly over a plate of food, he sensed both her strength and vulnerability. She shared tales of her late father, an inventor whose dreams lay dormant in the shadows of failure. Her voice was steady, yet each word punctured Henry's carefully constructed reality, revealing the truths he had long avoided. Unjust systems, the ones that had allowed his family to thrive, had snuffed out a creative spark from her world. Suddenly, he was confronted by more than just Sarah's personal struggles. It was a mirror reflecting his own life choices, those that had pushed others down in the name of ambition. The betrayal danced in his mind, shackling him with guilt. Then came the discovery of a forgotten patent, an idea stifled by forces he'd once unknowingly supported. Finding the remaining documents felt like reaching for light in a dark corridor. They could rewrite a legacy his if he chose to intervene. The thought both exhilarated and terrified him. Could he be the architect of redemption? Or worsen the systemic wrongs he'd inherited? Each revelation churned within him, a storm waiting to erupt. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as hope began to weave into the fabric of their growing bond, a corporate behemoth appeared on the horizon, eager to snatch away the patent rights that could breathe life into Sarah's family legacy. The deadline loomed, an audacious threat poking holes in their dreams. A persistent voice in his head whispered for him to act, perhaps to wield his wealth to fight against this incoming storm. Yet, what would he lose? The comfort of his cold, success-driven existence, or the chance to undo years of complicity? His gut twisted. He could almost taste the bitterness of choices yet unmade. Each day felt like a countdown to a decision that could irrevocably bind him to a future he didn't want, while also promising a chance for redemption he desperately craved. Would he step into the light of human connection or retreat back into the shadows of solitude he had known all too well? As he held the fragile documents in his hands, vivid memories of his past began to bleed into this moment, each one whispering promises, each one demanding an answer. Could he forgive himself long enough to help someone else? With every beat, his heart ratcheted up the tension, the walls around him inching closer as the impending storm drew near. Henry had thought that success was a destination, a point achieved through ambition, strategy, and relentless pursuit. But as he stood in the dim light of the food bank with the weight of the patent documents in his hand, he began to understand a more profound truth. Success was not merely about reaching the pinnacle, it was about the legacy he would leave behind. The enormity of this realization churned violently in his stomach. Could he redirect the course of his life, or was he simply too entrenched in his past? After their first meeting, Sarah had taken residence in his thoughts. He often replayed their conversation, gripped by the rawness of her pain and resilience. She had briefly illuminated the crevices of his heart, which he had locked away in a vault to protect his carefully curated life. Each time he thought of her, another layer of his tightly wound psyche unraveled. With the deadline looming, the dynamic between them shifted palpably. Henry remained mentally trapped, caught between the promise of his wealth and the shackles of his conscience. The corporate giant was relentless in its pursuit, relying on strategies he had once employed in his own business dealings: aggressive, persuasive, devoid of empathy. An unsettling realization struck him. With every passing day, the very tools that had built his empire would now be directed against someone like Sarah, innocent, vulnerable, and wholly deserving of a chance that he could facilitate. He began to plan, methodically picturing each possible scenario. How could he support Sarah without overshadowing her? He envisioned a conversation where he could offer his resources while emphasizing that her dreams were now valid again, that her father's legacy could see the light of day. But how would she react? Would she view him as a savior, or would she resent the shadow of his past successes? The emotional stakes felt high. Sarah's resilience was powerful, yet he couldn't ignore her quiet vulnerabilities that echoed the pain of betrayal. Henry's internal conflict deepened as he drafted an email to Sarah, detailing his intentions to protect the patent at all costs. Each keystroke felt like a declaration of war against the very fabric of his previous ambitions. He hesitated at times, questioning if he was acting out of genuine purpose or as a means to assuage his guilt. Was he willing to risk everything, his reputation, his carefully built empire, for someone else's dreams and, ultimately, his own redemption? He sat at his desk, the glow of the laptop illuminating the silent shadows surrounding him. Every flicker of his fingers was a reminder of the clock ticking away, the opportunity to act. Drawing a deep breath, Henry set about drafting a proposal to invest in Sarah's vision, positioning himself as an ally rather than a competitor. The thought empowered him, but a nagging fear lingered. What if Sarah rejected him, seeing him as yet another link in the chain that had bound her father's dreams? This was not merely an act of charity, this was a test of integrity. As he gathered the final draft, Henry realized that he was not just fighting for Sarah's patent, he was inching closer to accepting responsibility for the past. He pressed send, the finality of it feeling both terrifying and liberating. The decision was made, and the stakes had never been higher. Suddenly, the walls he had built around himself felt less like protection and more like a prison. As the minutes stretched into hours, he felt time elongate, filled with uncertainty, anticipation, and an unexpected flicker of hope. Little did he know, Sarah's response would bring a confrontation he never anticipated, one that would force him to directly reckon with his past choices, laying bare the true depth of his transformation. Henry's phone chimed unexpectedly, the sound slicing through the tension that had enveloped the room. He jumped slightly, fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment longer. This was it. The response he had been waiting for, laced with potential repercussions he could hardly fathom. He clicked open the email with a heart racing from both anticipation and fear. "Dear Henry," it began, each syllable seeming charged with weight. She had obviously taken care in crafting her reply. He braced himself, swallowed hard, and pushed forward, skimming her words. "I appreciate your generosity, but I need to understand your intentions." The wary tone of her response hit him hard. It was an echo of his own conflicts. Hadn't he spent the better part of his career using similar language to shield his true motives? His initial excitement waned as he pictured each word cutting further into an exquisite tapestry of hope that had just begun to weave itself in his life. Could he blame her for questioning him? The countless walls he had built around his own heart mirrored what she now raised around her dreams. As doubt crept into his mind, Henry felt a surge of determination. He realized that in order to persuade her, he needed more than just a bank account. He needed to confront her fears head-on. He would not only have to show that he was different from the ruthless tycoon she had faced, he had to convey the raw truth of his own transformation. This was not merely a transaction, it felt personal, forged in the intensity of their shared struggles. He began typing again, revealing his vulnerabilities with careful honesty. "I see your father's legacy as more than just a financial benefit. It's an opportunity for both of us to redefine success on our own terms." Each word felt like a small act of bravery, a departure from the polished veneer he had always worn in corporate meetings. In that moment, Henry's attention drifted to the corner of his office, where a family photo sat in a frame. Glancing at his younger self standing beside his father, a grim realization washed over him. He had fought his way to the top, often at the detriment of authentic relationships, while once learning from a father who cared deeply for others. Was he still that ambitious man, or had he evolved, shifting towards something kinder? Hours later, after he had poured his heart into the response, Henry felt exhausted. His decision to invest was now not only a financial venture, it was his attempt to correct a course he had long veered from. He hit send again, this time with a sense of quiet resolve. The weight of anticipation pressed down on him, but within it existed a glimmer of hope. It was the possibility that he could forge a partnership based on transparency and mutual growth, rather than manipulation. Minutes turned into an agonizing wait, the ticking clock a reminder of every risk laid on the line, and just as the silence settled thickly in the air, his phone dinged once more. A response from Sarah displayed on his screen, the subject line hinting at something profound: "Let us talk." That simple invitation was neither acceptance nor rejection, it was an invitation to confront their complex realities. Fear welled up inside him again, but Henry recognized a new resolve swirling within, intertwining with an undeniable excitement. This was his moment. The potential for personal growth lay ahead as they would now come together with shared fears and aspirations. As he prepared for their meeting, Henry realized the confrontation would transcend mere business. It would involve his past, choices yet unmade, and the legacy he had feared leaving behind. The time had come to face the truths he had buried deep within, as much for Sarah's dreams as for his own redemption. In that charged atmosphere, everything could shift again. This was only the beginning, and as he locked eyes with the reflection of the man he had been in the glass, he understood that the journey was about to take a decisive turn. Could he truly rewrite his narrative alongside hers, or would their combined burdens weigh them down? The sun was beginning its descent as Henry arrived at the quaint cafe where they had agreed to meet. Its windows glowed warmly, but his stomach churned with uncertainty. He had envisioned this moment 100 times, rehearsed speeches slipping through his mind like forgotten lines as fresh scenarios emerged. How would Sarah respond to his overtures? He stepped inside, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the buzz of half-hearted conversations. Finding a table in the corner, he took a deep breath, scanning the room for her arrival. Each tick of the clock amplified his growing anxiety, reminding him of the first decisions he had made, the ones that so often hid behind a mask of ambition. This moment wasn't just about business, it was a reckoning. With minutes stretching endlessly, he began to reflect on his journey, the sacrifices, the missed opportunities for deeper connections. Had he traded sincerity for success? The path to redemption demanded more than just a willingness to invest financially. It required him to face the loss he had carried silently. Just then, the door swung open, and Sarah walked in, an embodiment of grace, her expression earnest yet guarded. Henry stood to greet her, the familiar mixture of admiration and trepidation creeping back into his chest. Her eyes were deep pools of unspoken stories, and he felt an involuntary urge to bridge the gap between them, to erase any fears standing in the way. "Henry," she said, her voice steady. "Thanks for meeting me." "Thank you for being willing to talk," he replied, gesturing towards an empty chair across from him. He settled into his seat, heart pounding beneath his tailored shirt. As they exchanged pleasantries, Henry could not help but notice the subtle tension in her posture, the weight of expectations hanging thick in the air. After a few minutes of small talk, he decided it was time to unveil his intentions. "Sarah, I see this investment as a way for both of us to navigate our legacies, not just financially but emotionally. I want to build something meaningful." The sincerity with which he spoke surprised even him, his voice clear and resolute. But Sarah's brow furrowed slightly, a response he had anticipated. "Meaningful how? My father's legacy isn't just about numbers, Henry. It's my family's history." "That's exactly it," he pressed on, determination firing through him. "Your family history is tied to something much larger than business. It's about values, relationships, and what you leave behind." He felt the tremor of vulnerability rippling through the words, and for the first time, he allowed himself to lay bare the fears he shared, the fear of failing and the desire to craft a new narrative. Her expression softened slightly, but a flicker of skepticism remained. "You talk about redefining success, but I wonder if you truly understand what that means. Success can often mean sacrificing parts of ourselves." The raw intensity of her words landed hard. They could easily become a confrontation, yet he recognized it as an invitation to deeper authenticity. "I do understand," Henry replied, emotion rising within him. "I've sacrificed aspects of my life for ambition, only to realize that chasing success often left me isolated." His heart raced, knowing he risked exposing himself completely. "I want to ensure that this partnership nurtures both our ambitions while still holding space for our vulnerabilities." In those moments, Henry realized they were standing on the precipice of discovery, both wrestling with the shadows of their past choices. But how would they transform this conversation into something empowering, a mutual awakening rather than just a transactional agreement? The soft murmur of the cafe faded into a distant hum as he awaited her response, attempting to gauge if the barriers between them might dissolve. "Can we truly reshape our paths?" she asked, the worry evident in her tone. Henry's pulse quickened. This question ignited a fire within him. "I believe we can, but it has to start now, here." His voice was more than just a promise, it was a commitment to a journey that would carry both of them beyond their fears, but even as resolution washed over him, he sensed the looming specter of uncertainty. Would she take that leap with him, or would they spiral back into their old patterns of doubt? "Then let us talk about what that looks like," Sarah finally said, her gaze unwavering. As they plunged deeper into vulnerability and ambition entwined, Henry knew the stakes had risen. But with this newfound depth lay the potential for both personal growth and transformative partnership. What would emerge from this exchange? The chance to redefine their futures. Could vulnerability forge a foundation strong enough to withstand the weight of their shared fears? Henry's heart raced as he realized the next step held the potential to either solidify their paths or threaten to unravel them altogether. As the conversation unfolded, Henry could feel the subtle shift in the atmosphere between them. The initial chess game of guarded exchanges transformed into something resembling a duet, each note resonating with the complexities of their intertwined pasts and uncertain futures. He could almost visualize their paths like a dual river, meandering but converging at a point that felt increasingly inevitable. Sarah leaned forward, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "If we're going to reshape our paths, I need to understand what drives you beyond this investment," she said, her voice steady yet tinged with vulnerability. Henry swallowed hard. This was the precipice where he had often faltered. "Honestly, I've always defined myself by what I can achieve professionally. I thought success meant climbing higher, accumulating more, but I've been so blinded by ambition that I've neglected what truly matters. Connection over competition." The weight of his admission hung heavily in the air. The truth feels both liberating and terrifying. "I understand that feeling," Sarah replied, her brow furrowing slightly as if she too was wrestling with unspoken demons. "After my father died, I was left with a legacy that felt burdensome. I thought preserving it meant replicating his methods, but I'm realizing that I might be suffocating under that expectation." The resonance in her admission sent a surge of empathy coursing through him. Henry wanted to reach across the table, reassure her that she was not alone in her struggle. Could they build something together that would honor both their legacies without shackling them to a past they didn't fully own? What if we took this opportunity to create not just a business model but a narrative? Henry proposed, excitement creeping into his tone. "One where we honor your father's legacy while crafting our own story, a story that allows both of us the space to grow." Her eyes bore into his, searching for the sincerity he hoped shone through. "And if that narrative fails? What then?" Henry felt a wave of discouragement washing over him, but he fought it back, grounding himself in the moment. "Failure doesn't have to be final. It can point us in a new direction, teach us invaluable lessons. That's part of the journey. Besides, I'm more afraid of stagnation than of failing." She smiled slowly, and he saw the glimmer of possibility emerge within her guardedness. "So, what does this look like on the ground? How do we even start?" With every word, he sensed a new shift. This was not merely a meeting about investment, it felt like a collaboration of souls, each willing to meet the other halfway. "Let us begin with what that legacy means to you. What story do you want to tell, and how do you want to honor your father while allowing room for your own voice?" As the questions hung between them, Sarah's fingers started tracing doodles on the napkin. "I've never considered my own story in depth. I always felt I had to follow the script laid out for me." The hesitancy that followed spoke volumes. The path of creativity and authenticity had rarely been laid before her, obscured by duty and expectation. Henry sensed a breakthrough but also the enormity of the challenge. "We're going to have to confront those scripts, the ones society wrote for us, and the ones we wrote for ourselves," he said softly. "This will require bravery for both of us." The cafe hummed softly around them, oblivious to the profound exchange taking place. Time slipped as they delved deeper into their respective narratives, unearthing shared fears and desires. Each revelation sparked a flicker of determination within Henry. Not merely for himself but for them both, yet, amid their dialogue, he couldn't escape the gnawing doubt. Was this merely a fleeting moment of connection, or the start of something exponential? Henry, Sarah finally said, her gaze piercing into his, if we're going to do this, it won't just be easy conversations over coffee. Are you truly ready to embark on this, no matter how complex it gets? His heart raced at the weight of her words, both a challenge and a commitment. I am, he replied, the conviction in his voice stronger than ever, resonating with the rapid beat of possibilities unfurling in his mind. But uncertainty loomed larger than the coffee cups on the table. Would they rise to the occasion, forging a new narrative together, or would the shadows of their pasts pull them back into the familiar orbit of doubt? His thoughts raced as the conversation took on a life of its own, steering them toward a junction where fear and hope collided. A decision loomed ahead, one that would test their willingness to embrace both the risks and rewards of vulnerability. Then let us dig deeper, Sarah suggested, her eyes lit with resolve. And as they leaned into this newfound intimacy, Henry realized they were approaching a pivotal juncture, a moment that could either shackle them to the ghosts of their pasts or liberate them to build a story worth telling. What awaited them as they prepared to explore the depths of their ambitions, confronting not only their internal struggles but also the external pressures tethered to their choices? The question echoed loudly in his mind, urging them both to take the leap into the unknown. Would they have the courage to embrace whatever came next? Henry's mind buzzed with a blend of excitement and fear as he considered Sarah's invitation to delve deeper. The cafe, with its soft chatter and rich aroma of coffee, began to feel like a sanctuary. Each word exchanged felt like unearthing buried treasure, revealing not just layers of history but avenues for growth yet unexplored. What if we start by mapping out our joint vision? He suggested. He leaned forward, palms pressed against the table, the very act signaling a commitment he hadn't fully realized he was offering until that moment. Sarah nodded, her fingers momentarily pausing in their dance across the napkin. That sounds right. But it might mean saying goodbye to some of the expectations I've carried for so long, she replied, her voice balancing on the edge of uncertainty. Maybe that's the first step, Henry countered, his insides nodding with each syllable. You can only build a foundation if you clear out the rubble. He thought of his own ambitions and how many were tangled with external validation. It wasn't just her legacy at stake, it was a shared opportunity to redefine how each of them saw their pasts and futures. Sarah's brow furrowed as she considered his words. I've spent years trying to live up to my father's legacy. I never gave myself permission to want something different, something that feels authentically mine. For a moment, Henry could almost see the burden manifest in her features, a ghost hovering just beyond her shoulder. He realized this was not merely an exercise in business, it was a chance to disentangle themselves from the shackles of their histories. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the success defined by my parents, he confessed, the vulnerability of sharing hitting him like a wave. But what have I truly achieved without being true to myself? That's the question that has haunted me. Silence enveloped them, heavy with the weight of shared revelations. Maybe we should list what we really want, away from our family's shadows, Sarah finally suggested. The idea hung in the air, inviting a transformative shift. Yes, Henry replied, his pulse quickening. The prospect of new possibilities ignited a fire within him. Let us not just identify what we want but also what we fear losing in this process. As they exchanged ideas, a blueprint for their new story began forming on the table between them. He was surprised how easily words spilled from his lips, dreams long tucked away emerged, stirring issues he had buried beneath ambition and pressure. I worry that I won't measure up without my father's guidance, Sarah admitted, intertwining her fingers at the edge of the table. His voice is always there, reminding me of where I came from. That voice is yours to transform, Henry replied, feeling a surge of camaraderie swell between them. We can choose what parts of that legacy we want to carry forward and what we'll leave behind to forge our paths. His determination resonated in Sarah's gaze, a flicker of hope igniting where there had been uncertainty just moments before. But as their brainstorming session wore on, the shadows of doubt lurked just outside their bubble. What if the path they forged together simply strained under the weight of their expectations? I don't want to fail you, she whispered, her vulnerability crackling in the air like static. Henry's heart pounded in his chest. I won't let that happen, but we'll need to be honest with each other. If at any point the narrative pulls us apart, we'll have to acknowledge it, he said firmly. The gravity of their agreements settled over them. There was a collective commitment not just to success but to maintaining a connection deep enough to withstand potential fractures.
Should we set some milestones? Sarah suggested, her enthusiasm reigniting. Tangible goals to ensure we're on the right track?
Yes, and perhaps a system to check in on our emotional well-being too, he added, considering the intricacies of accountability that went beyond business. This was more than just a professional partnership, it was a journey into the unknown, an exploration of their souls forged in the fires of ambition and expectation. They began to sketch out their aspirations on napkins, punctuated by laughter and moments of revelation, but deep down, Henry felt the echoes of their pasts looming with each new ambition they defined. Each milestone could serve as a stepping stone or a potential stumbling block. Could they maintain the necessary balance between personal truth and inherited legacy? The stakes were rising as they envisioned the forthcoming months of collaboration, a journey that begged the question of whether they could maintain focus amidst the chaos of their internal battles. Henry's mind echoed with the questions of the future. Would their partnership emerge stronger, or would their fears ultimately cascade into conflict? As he looked into Sarah's determined gaze, he couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes had just multiplied. What would their first step into accountability reveal about their true selves, and how would it shape the future they sought to create together? Henry stared out the cafe window, watching the world move in its relentless pace. Outside, leaves danced in the wind, carefree and unburdened. He envied that simple freedom. Inside, he felt the tremors of uncertainty as he and Sarah began to solidify their plans, engulfed in flashes of hope and lingering trepidation. Let us consider what truly matters to us, he proposed, his voice a careful balance of encouragement and gravity. What do we each envision a year from now? Let us imagine the life we crave, not the one we've been told we should want. Sarah's eyes darkened for a moment as though he had unlocked a door to her hidden anxieties. I'll be honest, Henry. I've always felt trapped in my father's narrative. Success, for me, has been synonymous with his approval. Unpacking that feels daunting. Henry nodded, recognizing her struggle as echoing his own. It's not easy stepping out from someone else's shadow. What if we instead redefine success together? What does it mean for you personally? She paused, and in that silence, Henry could see her wrestling with possibilities. He, too, felt the weight of familiar doubts skirmishing against a burgeoning sense of agency. He tapped a pen against the napkin, a rhythmic reminder of the changes they were about to set in motion. I want to create a space where creativity isn't stifled, where people can express themselves without judgment, Sarah finally replied, the tremor in her voice giving way to a spark of passion. But I fear judgment, especially from my family. What if they don't believe in my vision? What if you don't believe in it? Henry countered, feeling a surge of realization that surprised even him. Belief has to start from within. We have to be our own champions. What if we wrote down a mantra, a declaration of who we choose to be, not who we think we should be? The idea hung between them, charged with potential. He could almost visualize it, the words etching themselves into something tangible. Language had power, and framing a vision in a transformative statement could reshape their perspectives. What would yours say? Sarah asked, genuine curiosity glinting in her gaze. Henry hesitated, grappling internally with the words that felt monumental yet delicate. I think it would revolve around authenticity, staying true to who I am while pushing boundaries. Something like, I embrace my journey with courage, curiosity, and a commitment to my truth. Sarah smiled softly, admiration mingling with envy in her expression. That's beautiful. I want mine to include freedom. I choose to live without limits, unapologetically. He sensed the atmosphere shift, conversations about their pasts gave way to aspirations. However, a dark undercurrent of doubt remained, nagging at the edges of the enthusiasm that was beginning to thrive. How do we manage crippling expectations as we step into these new identities? Henry wondered aloud, his heart heavy. Expectations had shadows, reminders of failures and missed approvals. We find a way to navigate through them, one small step at a time, Sarah stated, determination glimmering in her eyes. Maybe we can keep perspective by regularly revisiting our declaration and holding ourselves accountable. Yes, we need reminders that we are choosing this path, regardless of outside pressures, Henry replied, feeling invigorated by their mutual resolve to face those demons together.
As the afternoon light faded, a quiet understanding nestled between them.
Each plan etched on the napkin seemed to solidify not just their business aspirations but the foundations of their identities. Yet, an unsettling thought wormed its way into his mind, a reminder of the fragility of their intentions. What if the expectations they sought to defy would only amplify the pressure they felt? The journey would be precarious, and every move forward could potentially rattle their fragile sense of purpose.
That leaves us with a critical decision, doesn't it? Sarah interrupted his spiraling thoughts.
Her gaze was steady, and in it, Henry recognized the urgency for clarity.
How will we know when the demands become too heavy?
As he absorbed her question, the weight of their commitments loomed larger. This was not merely a path forward, it was a test of character that could either unite or fracture their growing partnership. Henry took a deep breath, ready to define the way forward while acknowledging the stakes.
We face it together. We promise to communicate every step of the way, and if it becomes too much we pivot, we adapt, and we are honest about it.
But as he made that commitment, a flicker of doubt caught the edge of his thoughts.
Would he be strong enough to uphold that promise when the time came?
Their conversation paused as they both stared at the napkins filled with scribbles of ambition, the mundane transformed into a map of intention.
The dusk deepened outside, shrouding the cafe in shadow yet mingling hope with trepidation.
Henry was about to speak when suddenly a message on his phone flashed across the screen from a familiar but unwelcome name. The moment of truth was arriving, and with it came the realization that their journey might sail directly into the storm.
Would it empower them, or mark the beginning of their unraveling?
Henry's heart raced as he glanced at his phone, the screen glowing ominously with a name from his past. It was a message from Richard, his former mentor, the man whose expectations had loomed large throughout his early career. A mix of anxiety and dread coursed through him. On one hand, he feared the impending pressure that would inevitably accompany any interaction with Richard, but on the other, he couldn't shake the nagging curiosity about what this correspondence could entail.
You okay? Sarah's voice broke through his tumultuous thoughts.
She was watching him intently, an anchor amidst the turmoil. Just an old contact, he said, swiping the notification away.
Not important.
Yet, his heart contradicted him, thrumming loudly enough to drown out any sitting rationality. Richard had been the representation of success, the very same success they were trying to redefine.
What would this communication mean for their plans?
Henry, she began, sensing the change in his demeanor, we said we would be open with each other.
What if this is something that could shift everything we're trying to build?
Her words sparked a battle within him. He was caught between 2 points, the comforting embrace of their new ambitions and the daunting shadow of someone who had defined success for him. I guess it's just Richard has a way of making me doubt my choices.
He has this confidence that feels unswayable.
Sometimes, I think about how hard I worked to gain his approval. Then maybe it's time to confront that, rather than shy away.
We have to carve our own path, remember?
Her eyes sparked with that same unwavering determination. The warmth of her encouragement began to chip away at his defenses, igniting a flicker of courage within him.
You're right. It might not hurt to at least see what he wants.
Okay, she said, a smile forming on her lips.
Just know that whatever happens, you're not alone in this. You're choosing your narrative, remember? And it matters. With a deep breath, Henry drew closer to the warmth of the cafe's light. He decided to respond instead of suppressing the inevitable.
His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant yet resolute. It was time to face the architect of his self-doubt, a confrontation years in the making. Richard's reply came quickly, as it always did. I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity, the message read. There was a certain weight to the words that made Henry's stomach twist. Opportunity, he muttered under his breath as he stared at the screen. Was it truly an opportunity, or merely a reminder of what he had sacrificed to escape that path, a mere trap disguised as a beneficial offer? Sarah leaned in, her voice soft.
What do you want, Henry? What is this opportunity going to cost you?
To take it or leave it, which choice feels truer to who you are now?
Henry mulled over her words, grasping their significance. He felt the pull of conformity battling against the yearning for authenticity. He was at a crossroads not just with the opportunity Richard presented, but with himself. Choosing truth over approval becomes more important with each passing moment, he whispered, almost to himself. Exactly, Sarah encouraged him. It's time to live by that mantra. What could come from a conversation that challenges your current beliefs? Think of it as a test. How much have you really changed? The thought invigorated him. He could envision the conversation, fending off old doubts while asserting his new beliefs. Writing the mantra down had empowered him, now, it was time to embody it. That's it, he stated, suddenly more sure of himself. This might just reveal whether I've really stepped beyond those expectations. Was this a chance to redefine his relationship with Richard? Or was it merely another pathway leading to the same relentless standards he'd fought to escape? As Henry prepared to respond, he realized he needed to articulate his boundaries, confronting his fears in real time. But with the click of a button came an unsettling recognition. Did he genuinely grasp the principles he sought to uphold, or was this newfound resolve merely an illusion? He hit send, the message propelling into the digital ether, taking with it all the threads of doubt and hope entwined in his mind. It was a step no matter how tentative toward his commitment to authenticity. Across from him, Sarah's smile deepened, the promise of camaraderie still lingering in the air. Yet, in the pit of his stomach, another thought simmered. How would he react when faced with the truth of his choices, especially when the conversation with Richard arrived? The spark of anxiety flickered, and with it, the knowledge that darkness was waiting around the corner. Could he withstand the temptation to slip back into that world of validation, determination coursing through him? Henry looked out at the night sky, the stars flickering like possibilities. It felt like a prelude to the storm and a beckoning call to reclaim his narrative. But uncertainty loomed at the back of his thoughts, the question still lingering: would he emerge stronger, or would he drown in the very waters he tried to navigate away from? The following day, Henry found himself pacing his small apartment, the message from Richard replaying in his mind like a broken record. The silence of the rooms closed in around him, amplifying the tension. He was supposed to be preparing for a meeting with potential clients, but all he could think about was what Richard expected of him. The man once held the keys to his ambitions, and now a simple text had cracked open an old wound. Henry stopped in front of the mirror, scrutinizing himself, searching for signs of the man he had crafted over the last year: confident, unyielding, authentic. Yet, in this moment of self-reflection, he felt the familiar pangs of insecurity creeping back in, gnawing at his progress. Who am I without Richard's approval? He whispered to his reflection. This was his moment, the crucible in which he needed to forge his identity anew. Did he have the strength to rise above his past? As he prepared himself for the upcoming meeting, he patchworked a semblance of clarity. Choosing authenticity had become his mantra, a newfound principle he must leverage in every aspect of his life. The meeting could serve as a practical application of that belief. They were potential clients, after all, interested in the project he had been diligently nurturing with Sarah. With each passing minute, as he read over his pitch, Richard's email kept resurfacing. Thoughts of him eclipsed the excitement he would normally feel about showcasing their work. This isn't just about winning a contract, he reminded himself. It's about proving to myself that I am more than my past. As Henry took a deep breath, adjusting his jacket, the doorbell chimed. It was Sarah, buoyant and eager. Ready to dazzle? She asked, her optimism infectious. Let us hope so, Henry replied, pondering whether his confidence was genuine or merely a veil. Her presence grounded him, reminding him that he was not alone in the storm. They exchanged a reassuring glance, and together walked towards their fate. The meeting space shimmered with polished surfaces, the scent of brewed coffee filling the air. Henry's heart thudded heavily, but Sarah's presence next to him was a reminder of their journey and the growth they had undergone together. As the clients walked in, Henry flashed a smile, quickly ushering any insecurities aside. They exchanged small talk, and instinctively, he pulled from his experience, showcasing the project with a fluidity he hadn't anticipated. Yet, with each point he made, the specter of Richard's shadow loomed larger in the back of his mind. Would Richard have presented it differently? Would he have disapproved of Henry's unconventional approach?
Suddenly, Sarah caught his eye from across the table, her expression filled with encouragement. In that moment, something clicked within him. He was not trying to impress Richard, he was here to share their vision, the vision they believed in together. Every sentence spoken now felt less like a performance and more like a declaration of his true self. Henry found reassurance in Sarah's nods, and the anxiety that had fluttered in his stomach began to dissipate. The meeting proceeded smoothly, with admiration from the clients, their interest piqued. As they wrapped up, Henry stood next to Sarah, unsure of how to say goodbye without the usual temptation to fall back into the approval-seeking role of his past. "Thank you for your time," he said firmly, letting the words linger as a declaration of newfound power. He wasn't asking for validation, he was presenting an opportunity. With the meeting concluded, a wave of relief washed over him. They stepped outside into the bright sun, the air buzzing with energy. Sarah turned to him, eyes gleaming. "You were incredible!" she exclaimed, the infectious sparkle in her voice buoying him. "Thanks to you," he said, shyly attributing her support to his success. As they walked towards their next destination, Henry felt a sense of liberation. He began to understand, what used to encapsulate him now played more like an echo, a fading memory of self-doubt. Yet, the unaddressed email from Richard still loomed over him. The next confrontation awaited, and he wasn't prepared for the potential backlash from this powerful figure, but in his mind, a new resolve formed. This time, when he spoke to Richard, he would assert his boundaries. He would articulate not just his goals, but the vision that Sarah and he had forged in the depths of their struggles. Later that evening, the sun dipping below the horizon, he found himself staring at the same phone that had incited this whirlwind. Nervously, he considered how to respond to Richard's prompt. The real opportunity lay not in the meeting. There was potential in choosing how to engage with this conversation deliberately, authentically. Suddenly, a notification pinged a new message from Richard, "Looking forward to our discussion. I think you'll find the offer quite appealing." A knot tightened in his stomach. Would this be the pivotal moment where he revoked the chains of the past? Or would he find himself stumbling back into their hold? As his fingers trembled over the screen, he prepared to confront his greatest barrier and choose his path forward. The moment had arrived to face the architect of his doubts, to filter the reflection of his past against the promise of his present. With a deep breath, Henry began to type. Each letter, each word was an act of defiance against the insecurities that had haunted him for so long. "Thank you for your message, Richard. I'm looking forward to hearing your proposal, but I want to clarify my current stance. I've been re-evaluating my goals and believe the direction in which I'm heading has shifted. I'm committed to partnerships that align with my values and vision." He paused, heart racing, then hit send. An electric blend of fear and freedom coursed through him. This was not just a response, it was a declaration of his transformation, a refusal to be defined by Richard's expectations. Henry felt a weight lift as he stepped back from the screen. Instead of succumbing to the pressures that had once dictated his decisions, he had chosen to embrace clarity. The heaviness that had plagued him during previous engagements with Richard now felt replaced with a buoyancy he hadn't sensed in years. He had reclaimed his narrative, consciously choosing to connect his ambitions with authenticity rather than obligation. Later that week, he received a response that rattled him. Richard wanted to meet in person to discuss business opportunities and, not surprisingly, to persuade Henry back into his fold. Just as anticipation began to mount, he found a message from Sarah bursting with excitement about their project. She wanted to plan their next steps and brainstorm their philosophy further. "Let us make this more than just another collaboration. Let us inspire not just ourselves but others around us," she wrote. As he read her words, Henry felt the tether to his past loosen further. A bright line opened between two futures, not one dictated by systemic expectations, but rather one co-created through partnership, creativity, and vulnerability. The cafe where they had been meeting had transformed into a sanctuary for ideas, a launchpad where they would articulate their new vision. "Let us create our manifesto," Henry proposed during their next meeting, excitement swelling. They embarked on defining not only legacy, but also purpose. Mapping out their plans was exhilarating, far removed from past corporate maneuvers that relied heavily on influences he no longer wanted to emulate. Over the next weeks, Sarah and Henry worked endlessly on their plan. They meticulously pieced together a thoughtful approach that honored Sarah's father's inventions while also allowing space for their personal narrative stories of resilience intertwined with aspirations of innovation. Their first endeavor was to open a community space that allowed local inventors and creatives to gather, share ideas, and collaborate. It was a bold step away from capitalism's isolating grip toward community, fulfillment, and shared success. As Henry drafted the announcement for a crowdfunding campaign, he reflected on the profound transformation that had taken place within himself. This was more than just a business initiative, it was a movement grounded in authenticity. On the day the announcement was made, the response was electric. Messages poured in from supporters, eager to join a cause that transcended profit, a venture that embraced creativity, identity, and community over traditional, isolated success. As the campaign gained momentum, Henry stood with new confidence, finally aware of the impact he could have on others' lives without the chains of expectation shackling him. In the days that followed, he continued to balance work on the project while navigating his relationship with Richard. The former mentor's attempts to sway him toward old ways began to feel less significant. "Remember, success is what you make of it," Sarah reminded him during one of their many strategy sessions. Their mutual commitment to honesty served as a safeguard against regression into old habits. Months rolled by, the project flourished, and Henry found himself thriving. He had become an advocate for redefining success, one who upheld the concept of emotional fulfillment as paramount. While he had once pursued wealth with single-minded focus, he now found he had embraced a much broader ambition, connecting lives, creating opportunities, and uplifting spirit over ego. As they prepared for the grand opening of their community space, Henry looked at Sarah with a pride he hadn't anticipated feeling. She smiled back at him, sharing that same pulsing excitement, sharing a journey they crafted together. He stood at the entrance of the new space, taking in the buzzing energy around him, and reflected on the man he had become, solidified not just through achievements, but embraced and transformed through understanding. No longer defined by the fear of failure or the shadowy standards of others, he now understood what it meant to create significance in his life. And with that, he had achieved more than success. He had conquered the self-doubt that had haunted him, emerging as a leader shaped both by his past and resolutely hopeful future. As the festivities unfolded around him, he smiled, realizing he had also helped Sarah emerge from her own shadows. Together, they had rewritten their narratives into something profound. Now, as he looked to the busy crowd gathering inside, a voice echoed within him: authenticity and connection would forever define their journey. Now is the moment for you. You need to subscribe to our channel immediately to not miss out on the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to nourish the algorithm and spread these messages of personal growth far and wide. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this inspiring conclusion. Comment below with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about how personal journeys define achievements. Your support is essential.